Hello, my name is CXCD, and I'm very interested in this. This is a Sega Dreamcast. It was released in 1999. More specifically, it was released September 9th, 1999, which means it was released 9/9/99. Anyways, I mean, it was a very interesting console, wasn't it? It had internet capabilities, it was almost as powerful as the PS2, and on top of all of that, it was released a full year before the PS2 hit the shelves. But unfortunately, the Dreamcast was Sega's last failure in a very long line of failures. For a hot minute, they were the kings of the world, but then they fell all the way back down. And they landed here, with the Dreamcast. This was their last-ditch attempt at making a console, and it was a valiant effort. I mean, hardware-wise, software-wise, game-wise, there was nothing really wrong with the Dreamcast. It's a very powerful console, especially for 1999. But unfortunately, the company side, Sega, they were struggling. To be fair, the Dreamcast wasn't exactly doing bad. I mean, it was only on the market for 2 years and sold 9 million units, but that was not a failure. The original Xbox, the Fat Boy, in its entire 5-year market span, it sold 24 million units. 24 million units divided by 5, that was about 4.8 million units per year for the Xbox. It was 4.5 million units per year with the Dreamcast. That means that the Dreamcast was keeping up with the Xbox. And I mean, for better or for worse, Xbox is still around today, aren't they? But with their business struggling, Sega had to make a choice. Either they pulled out of the console market and became a third-party company, or they killed their arcade market. Only one of them was making money, and it was not the console It was not the console market. And on top of that, there was actually a lot of internal beef within Sega. A lot of people didn't even want to make the Dreamcast. And choosing between their arcade business or the console business, a lot of people wanted the consoles to die. Pulling out of the console business was the only way Sega would not go bankrupt. Well, they still did kind of, but that's a story for another day. Also, did you know it's really easy to pirate games on the Dreamcast? Half-Life was released in 1998, and it's still 26 years later one of the greatest games of all time. Due to when it released, the idea of a console port was just straight up out of the question. Their options were the Sega Saturn, the N64, or the original PlayStation, all of which were woefully under-equipped to handle, at the time, a very intense game. Well, I mean, I guess James Lambert or Kaze Amanier could probably get it running on the 64. I think those guys made some kind of blood pact with Satan. That was until 1 year later the Dreamcast came along. The Dreamcast was powerful enough to run it, and Gearbox took the helm of porting Half-Life to the Dreamcast, and even went as far as to make their very own expansion pack called Blue Shift, exclusive to the Dreamcast. And yes, when I say Gearbox, I do mean that Gearbox, the one who made Borderlands. But as the story goes, the Dreamcast port was cancelled just mere weeks before its release. Every games manufacturer saw the writing on the wall that the Dreamcast was dying, and it would have honestly just been stupid to release Half-Life for a platform that had halted all production. So Gearbox went right back to work, not only releasing Blue Shift on PC, but also making a new one, a new expansion pack called Decay for the PS2. That's right, they shifted production to making a port for the PS2, and that is the Half-Life port we all know and love. I even have it myself. But there is just something about having a console this over-engined Half-Life. But then, years later, a development build of the original Dreamcast version of Half-Life was leaked online. And not just any development build, it was the very last development build ever, just before development was halted and cancelled. Now anyone, including me, can burn Half-Life onto a disc and play this leaked version. As you probably know, Half-Life has a pretty intense speedrunning scene. People have torn this game open in a way that I've just straight up never seen before. And there was even a few speedruns of the PS2 version. So naturally, I want to be the first guy to speedrun Half-Life for the Dreamcast, and force the moderators of speedrun.com to make a Dreamcast category. So without further ado, let's begin this speedrun. Oh, and by the way, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. Let's go! First impressions. Wow. This looks like garbage. Yeah, to be able to capture this game, I had to buy a really cheap component to HDMI converter, so I'll try to brighten it up in areas that need it, but I'm sorry about that. I've played this game a lot. I have over 200 hours in this game. I know about this game a lot more than most people do, and I also know how to skip a lot of this game. I even know how to launch myself across large areas like this. Okay, maybe not, but still, I'm really good, I swear. Half-Life on the Dreamcast runs surprisingly well. Oh, and because B-hopping is well near impossible with a controller, you'll notice that I might hug the wall occasionally. This is because when pressing up against a wall and walking forwards, Gordon gains a speed boost for some inexplainable reason. So I do it on purpose sometimes, but sometimes I don't. If you're wondering why I look like I'm drunk sometimes, it's because this is the controller I'm working with. Yeah, trust me, it's worse than it looks. This controller is truly god-awful. To some extent, it might even be worse than the N64 controller, because at least the N64 had the excuse that 3D graphics were still new. They were still figuring out how to control a 3D game. But this was made 3 years after the 64, and it only has one joystick. Dude! Half-Life tackles the movement problem, let's say, uniquely. To move, you use the face buttons, which feels exactly as badly as you think it would. Looking around, you use the analog stick, which means technically the inputs are flipped from a normal controller. Instead of looking with the right analog stick, you're looking with the left one. And to switch weapons, you better pull out your Street Fighter combo sheet. You hold down the left trigger and then use the D-pad to switch weapons. And what's funny is that jumping, ducking, and flashlight and use item are all also controlled with the D-pad. This is not intuitive, but to be fair, what else were they supposed to do? This controller was not made for a first-person game. I don't get hand cramps. I rarely ever get hand cramps. But this game brought my hands to the knees. Anyways, with that out of the way, I hope you can understand why my gameplay looks so bad. Like I said, I can kind of understand why they did it because Half-Life is just a first-person shooter, and this is just not a first-person shooter controller. I could theoretically plug in a mouse and keyboard to play the Dreamcast and play Half-Life that way, but I'd have to buy a Dreamcast exclusive keyboard and mouse, and those go for a pretty penny online. I don't want to pay that. And the next point of contention is the loading screens. I hope you like them because the Dreamcast was notorious for having horrific load times. And on top of that, a very noisy disk drive. It was so noisy, in fact, that the marketing team for the Dreamcast revolved around the console making sound. Do you remember the It's Thinking ads? That was because the Dreamcast was so freaking loud. It's thinking. They were marketing a product fault. And I mean, the PS1 didn't sound like that. The PS2, the Xbox didn't sound like that. So why does the Dreamcast sound like a dying dog? Long story short, it takes well over 20 seconds to load the next level. And in a game where level loads are as frequent as Half-Life, this takes up a lot of time. I mean, a lot of time. Out of my final time for the speedrun, about 20 minutes were dedicated to loading the next screen. You can skip dialogue here by pushing the scientist into the door to make him skip dialogue, but because of my absolutely horrific controls, I end up just taking more time to do it than if I just let the cutscene play out. Oh, and fun fact, it also takes about 30 seconds to save your game, maybe even more. This will become important later. After we overcook a crystal, something dawns on me. Playing Half-Life on this console from the 90s, really makes this game feel like a product of its time. Half-Life is one of those games that have aged super well, so playing it and seeing it feel like a 90s game is just a very interesting experience. It makes me feel like I'm watching Die Hard. Also, throughout these sections, my frame rate begins to dip a little bit. It's nothing major, but it just seems like it's worth mentioning. I get through these first few sections pretty quick, if not a little frame ratey. It seems like the good frame rates I mentioned from earlier have been scrapped, along with this game. As the further I progress, the laggier it gets, but don't worry, this is just the beginning, so it'll get better, right? Right? I almost forgot to pick up the security guard's gun. Can you tell I played Half-Life for 210 hours? I also want to mention that I get eaten by the door here for 10 health. I don't know how I did that. I almost drowned getting out of this water. I'm really struggling here. Now, here's a really cool skip. You're meant to stay here and fight these headcrabs on the elevator, but you can slide down one of these chutes and manage to skip the section, which saves you like a full minute. So I'll quickly just perform it on the Dreamcast version. Well, that's fine. I'll just load the last autosave. Shit. Huh. Here's a fun fact about this game. This game doesn't have autosaves. Although the PC version does, this game just doesn't. You have to manually save everywhere, which, as I've already told you, manually saving takes about 30 seconds. That means if you saved at every loading screen, you would have to spend well over a minute just getting to the next level. And these levels are pretty short, man. Anyways, now that I'm back to the section, I think it's time to mention that the maps have a few differences in them. For instance, this scary parkour section, while still scary on Dreamcast, this version has significantly more boxes for you to stand on. Gearbox probably realized that these controls were absolute doo-doo and tried to compensate with level design. Whether it worked or not, I don't think so, because this is still really tough, but I appreciate it nonetheless. For some inexplicable reason, they fixed this elevator skip. In the Steam edition, you can click this button through the wall and hug the door, and you'll be teleported to the next level. But out of everything they could have fixed with this game, they chose to fix this one weird glitch. They also redesigned this part of the office to look a little different. I don't know why it looks so different, because the game still lags horribly. I would have thought they would have done it to break sightlines, but it still lags pretty bad through here, which tells me that the area is still being rendered. Despite some movement issues, I speed through Office Complex pretty easily. It looks identical to the PC version, and outside of some darkness to the point that I can't see anything, it's all pretty easy. I make this jump, I make this jump, I make this jump, I make this jump pretty easily. Here, I attempt a skip. You can shoot the scientist and then stand next to him, and for whatever reason, the AI in this game decides to make him open the door that's supposed to stay shut, therefore skipping an entire chapter of the game. Now, how am I gonna pull this off on the Dreamcast, the console with crummy controls, low frame rates, and next to no visibility? Well, to be fair, I just don't.
For God's sake, open the silo!
Even with this insane loading time, it's still faster to do this than play the entire chapter, because I will literally be skipping an entire chapter. I failed to skip multiple times, and each time I want to retry it, it takes me almost a full minute to get back in position, because the skip only works if you load the level trigger, which means I have to sit through not only loading my save, but then immediately loading the next level. Eventually, I gave up and just did the chapter. It takes me way longer than I would have wanted, but I think that the skip might be literally impossible in the Dreamcast version. I think it was about here that my hand finally started cramping. It was genuinely getting harder and harder to play this game. My muscle memory of using the Dreamcast controller was being erased by pain. Throughout this playthrough, from when I first started to ended, I don't think I got better. Not even by a little bit. Finally, after what seemed like eons, I pushed the button that could have taken me 30 seconds if I pulled off the skip right. There is a way you can get a massive height advantage in this area, but unfortunately, air strafing is literally impossible with the controller. So I dunk my head right into the radioactive goo. I think this is the area where I really started to get worn down. Having to deal with these worm things really started to grate on me, and doing this whole section felt like just a job. It's especially frustrating because I've speedran this entire area before. I've speedrun this entire game before. I should be an absolute expert at this area, yet I end up flailing around like a bumbling idiot. I'm literally being limited by this controller. I don't think I've ever really been angry at a game before. Sure, I can get frustrated at a certain part that takes too long, but I've never experienced a game where I was just genuinely not having a good time. When I finally press this button to kill these godforsaken tentacles, I can almost breathe a sigh of relief. Emphasis on almost, because I realize the tunnel you're supposed to enter is literally pitch black. This is a me problem. It's not Half-Life's fault, it's a me issue. I chose this crappy HDMI adapter and I'm paying the price for it. It takes me way longer than I care to admit to get past this very simple tunnel because I am literally blindfolded. I genuinely can't see anything here. Where am I? This is also the part in the game where the FPS starts to really tank. It seemed fine throughout the beginning, but the longer and longer I play, the less refined and more unbearable it gets. And then I fall into this stupid trap and I get sent back 20 whole minutes because I forgot to frickin' save. This game hurts. And then I make possibly the greatest mistake in this run. I decide that I'm confident enough to skip taking the tram. And if you don't know already, if you stack trip mines here, and you can step on them, making a staircase over a wall that you're meant to break with the tram. The benefits of this is, as a speedrunner, you can skip this entire chapter, and very quickly beat on a rail too. However, I forgot one very simple thing about this skip. I'm on a Dreamcast. I die, and then I die again. How do I survive that? I survived it last time with a shit ton of health. Why is it just this one time? taking so much damage. I'm landing in water. If you can't tell my voice, I'm kind of getting angry here. This entire section was just awful. Dark visuals, horrific controls, and no tram by my own mistake. I'm gonna kill a man. I'm gonna fucking kill a man. Easy enough on PC, but on Dreamcast, I wanted to punt my console out the window. Really, this whole section was a slog. I got 10 inches forwards, saved my game by waiting 30 seconds, then another 10 inches forward. It took me over 30 minutes to get past this water hazard part, and over an hour, maybe even more, to complete this chapter. By the end of it, I was just so mentally drained, it wasn't even funny. It also didn't help, I kept dying to the soldiers over and over again, because they have hit-scan weapons, and on controllers, especially the Dreamcast controller, this just sucks. By the time I even turned my player to look at the grunt, I was already dead. And it didn't help that by the end of all of this, my frame rates were in the single digits, and I'm not even kidding. Eventually, I got sick of it, and I took a break to go eat dinner. While eating dinner, I realized something very important. I was barely over halfway through the game, and it's already been over 3 hours. I'm not doing this. I am not having fun. This hurts to play. I'm not having fun. I give up. I don't care that Speedrun.com is never going to have a Half-Life Dreamcast category. I don't care. As a matter of fact, I raise a torch to anybody watching. If anybody wants to finish this frickin' game for me and submit it to Speedrun.com, I would be grateful. Anyways, the entire unedited speedrun is in the description below. If you want to watch it, I mean, be my guest. It's over 3 hours long. And without further ado, I guess I'm done. I DNF'd. If you want to join the Discord server, it's down in the description below. Sayonara.
I bite at the hand that feeds me, slap at the face that eats me. Some kind of animal cannibal made impressions on me.